Time for a quick update on the Rudge 250. The last video I was saying that had stripped the engine, found a bit of play in the big end and a bit of a sloppy piston. After making that first video, I was talking to the original owner's grandson, who told me a great thing about the bike. He referred to it as a Wilfred Flyer. So Wilfred first bought the bike in, was it 1932? I can't remember. First bought the bike in 1932, let's say, and looks like he went through and tried to make it like a little bit faster, doing all sorts of little tuning parts, and apparently had a friend in the Rudge factory. So some of the ideas that had been done to it could have been from the racing department at Rudge. So since the last video, I've been looking at trying to get some parts. The big end pin, the crank pin on this seems difficult to get. You can get the one for the year after, but this year seems to be awkward. I'm not really sure why. But also I've decided to try and set myself a little challenge on this with this bike and see if I can make it go 100 miles an hour. And to do that, it's going to need a bit more power. So what I've decided to do is go to a BSA C11 crankshaft. These are a real sort of heavy duty item, but the good thing is that you can get crank pins and bearings and con rods and things relatively easily for these. So if it blows up, it's cheaper to fix. This is a really sort of heavy item. I haven't weighed it compared with the original, so I need to take quite a lot of weight off this. In order to fit it into the Rudge cases, it's a little bit wide, but that's no issue because I'm going to machine it down and probably do a bit of the knife edging that Wilfred did on the original, but reduce the weight quite a lot, and I need to reduce the width by a couple of millimeters to fit it into the cases. In terms of fitting the crankshaft in for the bearings, I'm going to use the C11 output shaft, which is retained on this sort of square end and is a press fit into the crankshaft. So on the output side, that shouldn't be a problem. I've measured the bearing. I should easily be able to source a bearing to go from the C11 output shaft through the Rudge case, and I'll decide what I'm going to do about an oil seal. I think these just relied on a tight fit of the output shaft, but I'm probably going to put a rubber seal in it just to sort of seal it up and reduce oil leaks. The pinion side is slightly more difficult. So on the Rudge, on the pinion side, you've got the bearing facing that it runs on. This taper here is for the timing gear. So what I'm going to do is make a new output shaft, a new pinion shaft that goes in the C11 crank, that is to these dimensions, so that the Rudge timing gear and oil pump drive will all fit in there, and I'll size it so that I can get a bearing through the casing. These bearings look like standard bearings, so originally they were a separate roller, an outer sort of setup. Can probably go to something a little more modern here. I was a little worried that these would have an oil hole in them, but they don't. They're just lubricated from the end. So that conversion is fairly straightforward. Another benefit of going to the C11 crank is on the Rudge, it has pressured oil feed, but the oil is just squirted out of this hole here into the side of the big end bearing. Yeah. It's not actually fed straight into the big end, where on the C11, oil passes somewhere up there, and I don't know if you can see it here without taking it to bits, is fed directly to the bearings on the crank pin. So that will be a bit of an upgrade of the lubrication system. The conrods, the Rudge conrod is actually about 10 mils longer eye to eye than the BSA conrod. And also, if I use a BSA C11 piston, I'm not completely fixed on this idea yet, but I will decide which piston to use. The compression heights are roughly the same, so using this setup I will be losing quite a lot of compression, and as I said, I wanted to make more power with this bike, and so I think the easiest way to make a lot more power is by fitting a supercharger. So this is a little supercharger that was fitted to, I think, Subaru Justies or something like that. It's a 300 CFM per revolution supercharger, which is probably a bit big for the application that I'm wanting here. So having a really low or really high compression volume means I can cram lots of air into the cylinder and get a lot of power out of each power stroke. So my next issue is, to begin getting on with this, is I need my lathe to be able to start machining the crankshaft and the pinion gear. So I'll take you to show you my the problem with getting on with that. This is the other project that I have to get on with before I can start the Rudge project. So as you can probably tell, I've been outside in the garden, in the cellar, and that is because I'm in the middle of workshops at the moment. This is hopefully going to be the new machine shop. I've got this Colchester Triumph 7.5 inch centre lathe. I've just had to lay a concrete base to put that on, and also I need to knock this wall out of the shed to get a little bit more space into the shed next door. So my main goal now is to get my lathe set up, so I need to install the motor, wire it up, get everything set so it's running true, and get it back in position, and then I can start machining my crankshaft. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks I'm going to get the lathe up and running and be able to start the work on the crankshaft. But for today I'm going to do some of the little jobs that need doing on the frame, just to move the project forward. I'm going to get on with sorting out these head bearings. So I'll strip this down and have a look what's going on. I suspect there aren't any bearings in it, or there's something amiss. If you tighten it up, it just goes too stiff. Also, it's got what claims to be 3x19 tyres, but they're really skinny and they just look really small on the bike. I'd prefer some 350x19s, but I've actually got some 4x19s. I'm going to see if they'll actually fit, because I think it'd give it a really stocky look, just make it look a bit bigger. So I can't see any issue with them going in the front forks. The rear, however, is pretty tight. Wilfred had put these sort of rear sets on, and the foot shift gear mechanism. I've done this before myself in the past, and they're really awkward to ride. You're putting all the weight on your wrists. They're no fun to ride at all. So I'm probably going to be removing this and putting it back to standard. So in order to fit the bigger tyre, probably going to remove this cross shaft that is put in, and I'm not sure if he's made these rear set brackets here, but I'll be removing those, and hopefully that'll give enough space for the tyre. If it doesn't, I might just have to space this rear frame section out a touch to get the tyre in, but I'll sort of fit the tyres and see what it looks like and decide after that. That's interesting. There's a small bearing in there mixed in with the big ones. Yeah, so there's a mismatch of bearings in there. I actually didn't expect to find any in there. Oh, look at the bottom. Some stuck inside. Yeah, there's a small one there as well. So it looks like there's just a mismatch of all sorts of bearings in there. I presume these larger ones are the right size, so I'll measure those up and count them up and get some bearings ordered, and she'll hopefully sort that front bit out. So I'd say that they're quarter inch ball bearings. Not the best thing to measure with a vernier, so they're probably quarter inch. I had some that I got for something else, but I think they're obviously smaller. So I'll get some new bearings ordered up, and that should fix that. Just taking the back bit of the frame off, just so I can chop these brackets off. And to do that, I've got to take the clutch off. And so, while looking at this, I've found the problem with the clutch. So the clutch rod, which is in there, the clutch rod was too short and going all the way up, so the arm was pulled all the way in before anything was happening in here. So I suspected there'd be something missing at this end. So the end of that rod just pushes on this little hardened button in here, and in doing so pulls the clutch against the springs. Looking at it, the button is still there. It just looks like the rod was too short. So that's a really simple fix. Simply put an extra a longer rod in, and that should be that problem solved. I was wondering, sometimes you can have an adjuster on here, so you can wind that in and out, but on this one it looks like you just must cut the push rod to length to get the action on the clutch that you require. You can see, I've got the 4x19 tyres on, and I think it looks much bigger. It gives it the appearance of a bigger bike. There is a little bit of spacing modification I'm going to need to do to these bottom frame rails. I think I'll just space them out both sides with a little aluminium spacer and reshape these arms. It clears, but it's very tight, so I'll just give it sort of 1/4 of an inch of clearance each side. That should do. The front tyre, the inner tube's actually got a hole in it, so I need to take that off again and sort the inner tube. And one of the next jobs I'm going to do is get some handlebars bent up, some like racing style handlebars. I'll make a template from a piece of welding rod and go and see my friend Tony at B&I Engineering and get some bars bent up. But I think the frame's starting to come along really nicely.